Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a rapid review of the C&O H8 Alleghenies. The reason why this is a rapid review is because I do not model C&O and therefore I do not have that much background information or knowledge on the C&O H8s. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what is accurate or what is inaccurate. And, because my channel is really centered around detail and accuracy as opposed to, drivetrain or mechanisms or pulling power, because honestly, all the engines made in the past 20 years have been, they run really well and they pull usually pretty well, especially with the introduction of traction tires being seen on almost all modern steam engines, unfortunately. Really, those aspects are all pretty much standard across the board these days. So I try to focus on detail, and unfortunately, because these engines, because I don't really know C&O, I won't be diving into that, and I'm not an expert at it. But because I did get two of these recently, I figured I'd share some things that I guess some opinions on these models, and where they do really well and where they kind of lack. So to begin, I guess we could start with what I really like about these engines in terms of detail. These are die-cast. They're fully die-cast, including the tender shell and engine shell, of course. But there are some detail, like plastic and I think maybe a few brass detail parts on here, which really, for the finer stuff. So for one, I can really appreciate the paint. MTH is one of the very few manufacturers who uses a satin finish instead of a matte finish on their engines, and you could tell that here by how glossy it is. It's not a full gloss, it's like a satin finish, but I really like the shine, the subtle shine on these engines. I think they look a lot nicer than the matte finish you see on like Bachmann, BLI, Pro 2000, etc. engines. I could really appreciate that. The engine is also very, very nicely detailed. There is a lot of separately applied piping, including especially I really like the really fine air lines coming out of the air tanks in the back here, or the front area. Oh, oopsie daisies. The front is very, very nicely detailed. Here we go. I really don't like how the iPhone's white balance really shifts a lot. Anyways, yeah, the front is very nicely detailed. The red accents on these check valves, I don't know if that's accurate, but I do like how they're pointed out. And it's also really easy to just paint over if you don't like it. Yeah, just like a lot of the really fine piping in the front. I really, really like the mechanical lubricator arms here. They do not move back and forth, but they are metal and they're very, very thin and very finely molded. And I think that really adds a nice touch to these models. On the left side here, you can see that there's a lot of nice plumbing around here. The distributor valve, the power reverse, just a lot of nice details going all around. One area that's commonly forgotten about is the sand lines that go below the running board. A lot of manufacturers will mold the sand lines or model the sand lines above the running board, but then they won't model the sand lines actually coming down and to the wheels. And as you can see here, MTH did model those, which is really cool to see. Yeah, so just all around really nice detail. Again, more of these non-functioning mechanical lubricator arms, or non-operating, I guess you should say. Yeah, a lot of finely molded detail. I really like the blow-down muffler down here, and yeah, the wheels also look really, really nice. I don't like how they don't paint the tires or axle ends, but really that's just industry standard. I don't really know why, but they just do that. They chose to make these pipes here, the large pipes here, out of plastic, which in my opinion is very smart. If they made these out of die-cast, it would rub against the bottom of the die-cast boiler and the paint would chip immediately, but because they are made of a black plastic, you could not chip these, and because it's a softer material, it won't damage the paint on either end, which is a good touch right there. There's also a lot of give on the boiler, which allows these to operate in 18-inch radius curves. It does look absolutely ridiculous operating in those curves. Both the front driver, the rear driver set, and all the leading and trailing trucks all turn. And that results in, as you can see here, rather ridiculous looking turning radius, which again, it looks ridiculous on those curves, so I would not recommend running on them, but if you wanted to, you could, and I really can appreciate the engineering. I'm sure it took a lot of engineering to be able to get this engine to run such tight curves. Again, that just looks hilarious to me. But anyways, yeah, really nice engineering on MTH's part, really well thought out. You could tell they put a lot of thought into modeling these engines. But yeah, so detail looks really good. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of perks. Oh, the one thing is I really do like this new drawbar design. I like how easy it is to use. There's no wires, and with all MTH wireless drawbars, there's no wires to plug in, no wires to break. So you can just plug this into the engine tender, very quick connection, which makes it very convenient to take in and out of the box. That is especially important if you don't have a layout at home and you go to the club all the time, so you have to take the engine in and out of the box frequently. That becomes very important to people like that. Yeah, all in all, very nicely detailed. The front is very delicate and fragile looking, but yet also very sturdy. These are brass wires instead of plastic, so they're very structurally sound, and they do have a little bit of give because they are brass. And yeah, all in all, just the engine just looks really fantastic, and looks great. Now, I will kind of talk about, next, I will talk about the differences between 1601 here and the other models that MTH produced, 1610, 1604, etc. They went out of their way to make 1601 prototype specific because it is the one H8 that is preserved. Right now, it is in the B&O Railroad Museum. So there are some detail differences. There's not a lot. There's only 3 things I noticed. First thing was the C&O Progress logo in the front here. Most other engines don't have that. Secondly, it doesn't have, I should say, the additional, I believe it's a blowdown muffler. I don't really know what it is, this part right here. But yeah, there's this extra piece here that is not seen on 1601. I believe it is on the other models, including 1604, but someone could double check me on that. But yeah, 1601 doesn't have that. And then lastly, 1601 has the panels covering the firebox. These are, I believe, the washout plugs. But yeah, so these, you can see it's exposed. This is molded in, whereas 1601 has the panels that cover it, represented on the model. So there's a lot less stuff going on here. So yeah, it is cool to see how how MTH was able to give 1601 some additional love and really represent those additional features. I don't know if it's accurate, but I'm assuming it is. I sure hope it is. But yeah. All right, now moving on to some of the drawbacks. So MTH, because they religiously want to make everything out of die-cast, they do not want to make anything out of plastic, there ends up being some drawbacks on that. So obviously die-casting technology is not nearly as advanced, as today, and even today, you know, you can get far finer molding in detail in plastic than you can with die-cast. And because MTH wanted to make everything out of die-cast to give it that really nice hefty weight, by these things pull so much. But because of that, there are some areas where you kind of get limitations. You're not able to get nearly as fine, you know, I guess parts, because they'll just break off. And so you'll see that noticeably in, for example, the running boards. These running boards are very, very thick. They have the nice tread on top of them, which looks really nice, but they are very thick, much thicker than they should be. If you look at prototype photos, they're a lot thinner than this. And it's especially noticeable because of the thick white running board. If this wasn't painted over, it would be more subtle, but because they accented it with the white paint, you can see how thick it is, especially relative to the white wall on the tires. That is rather noticeable to me and sticks out kind of like a sore thumb. There's also some details that are just molded on, because I guess I just didn't want to make them separately applied, like the firebox area, like all these are molded on, and it's very, very noticeable. The whistle steam feed pipe is molded on. This part here, it's very noticeably molded on. And I don't have a problem with molded on detail, but again, it's more noticeably that it's molded on than a plastic model. You'll see plastic models with molded in detail that looks a lot better. That could almost be mistaken as separately applied, but this is very clearly molded on, and it's because it's die cast, in my opinion. This side's less noticeable. Everything here is more or less separately applied. For example, there are obviously some parts that are molded on, like this injector, I believe. Yeah, it should be the injector pipe that goes from the turret down. That is molded in, and yeah, there's obviously some molded in detail. This power reverse line is kind of funny because it's molded in from the cab going through the firebox, but then at this point it transitions and becomes an actual separately applied wire going to the power reverse. So I don't know why they couldn't have they already made it separately applied. Why don't you just, you know, make it all the way? But anyways, so yeah, there's definitely some limitations in that. If we look over here on the tender, I think this is where it especially becomes bad, where the molded in die cast. Look how thick these stirrup steps are. These should be see-through for one. They should be totally see-through. And they obviously should not be this thick. They should be very, very thin, but look how hilariously thick that is. These look like just blocks. They just look hilarious to me. That looks, in my opinion, just really gives away the fact that it's a ready to run model. And I guess it won't be that hard to replace. You could just chop these off and replace them with brass parts or even plastic parts. I'd recommend brass because it's more structurally rigid. But yeah, these just look really bad to me. And also you can see areas like here where it should just have the tender shrouding go like over. Instead, yeah, it should go over and there should be empty inside here, but instead they just kind of filled that all in that black void with a just die cast. Again, really gives away the fact this is a model and not something very fine. This should be empty here, but instead it's filled in with die cast, and it's also filled in with die cast right here. So yeah, there definitely are limitations with the die cast technology because MTH chose to make these out of die cast. Tender also has some really good detail, like some of the piping underneath here is nicely represented. And again, you can see the clear difference between a plastic injection molded part like this. This is very nice. This is very fine and very nice versus this chunky blob of a die cast stirrup step. So yeah. The die cast is not great, and it really definitely shows the limitations of the model because of it. Another thing is I should say the co-load, just like all MTH models, is oversized. They're equivalent to the size of basketballs. That's the reference I like to say. So yeah. I did praise the drawbar technology, how easy it is to use earlier in the video, but now it's a drawback. This drawbar is absolutely massive. It is chunky. It is very noticeable. I would almost prefer having wires going between the engine tender instead of this ginormous piece of plastic. I know why they had to do it. They wanted to make it very rigid and strong. But it's so noticeable. It is massive, and even with the tender coupled together, it's so noticeably there. And it also sits so low to the ground. Like, it doesn't quite touch the track, but it almost does. I'm always afraid that if it's running over like uneven track, like maybe a switch or something like that, it will just catch. It's always been a concern of mine because it's sitting so low. If it was sitting higher up, like there, I think it'd be less noticeable, but because it sits so low, it is very visible to when the engine's running around, and I don't really like that at all. So yeah, drawbar, functionality fantastic, but looks not great. It's very noticeable, and yeah. I'd like to do a quick comparison between the Rivarossi Allegheny and the MTH Allegheny, because I'm sure people are curious and will ask me, but I don't feel like making a whole separate video just on this topic. So just real quick, the Rivarossi Allegheny, in my opinion, is a more plasticky but also more detailed version of the MTH Allegheny. It is an entirely, the boiler and the tender shells are both entirely plastic, but these are still actually the same exact weight, mostly because the Rivarossi engine doesn't have a smoke unit, which is very light, but instead it has a big chunky piece of metal in the boiler. And also both of them have traction tires, so they really should pull about the same. I haven't tested it myself yet. I don't have enough cars to really test it, to be honest, but they should pull about the same because they're the same weight and they both have traction tires. In terms of the detail that's missing, so on the MTH at least, the Rivarossi engine basically has all the details that I can see on the MTH engine except a few more. So for example, for one, the sand lines actually have flow control valves. You can see the little handles that the people would turn the pipes on and off on the sand lines, which the MTH ones doesn't have. The Rivarossi also has an additional pipe here, which I'm not 100% sure what it's for, but the MTH one is lacking that. The engine also has separate, I believe there's moisture traps on the air pumps, whereas the MTH ones are kind of just like baked into the air pump itself, which looks kind of strange. On the engineer's side, the Rivarossi engine again has all the same details as the MTH, including the working or the moving mechanical lubricators, but it also has the drain pipe here, which is very flexible, which is good. You want it to be flexible so it doesn't break off. The MTH one just completely ignores that. The Rivarossi engine also has some pipes that are not molded on like the MTH ones, but instead are actually separately applied, which in my opinion look better. However, that being said, some pipes that the MTH have that are in metal wire, which I prefer, are instead molded in plastic, which have a tendency to, are more fragile than the metal or copper wire that MTH uses. The plastic pipes can definitely break easier, and also there's a little bit of flash on them, so they don't look nearly as nice. But yeah, looking at the back of the engine, there's a big difference, and the difference is underneath the cab, the MTH1 is just completely missing any and all semblance of anything. It's just a big empty void underneath the cab here. I suspect it's because they wanted to create space for the drawbar, but it's completely empty, whereas the Rivarossi model actually has the correct, or at least actually has stuff, including the stoker, where the stoker would go, the engine tender, like bumpers, and just general is filled in with stuff, which is good. That's what it should look like. And it is noticeable on the side. The MTH1 is just oddly missing stuff. But yeah, for anyone that's curious, that is a difference. Also, I don't know if I mentioned, but the Rivarossi one has real turned brass whistles and safety valves and bells, whereas the MTH one is just painted gold, in my opinion, which looks worse. But yeah, on the tender, it's more of the same. The Rivarossi one has a better looking cola, in my opinion. It's more to scale. It doesn't have the empty void that the MTH has back here, but instead it actually has the additional lamp there with the wire cable, and also there's the correct spacing and gaps. The Rivarossi model also has chains on the trucks, which is cool, and it has the correct stirrup steps, which are see-through and have that bracket on the side, which again MTH just does not have. So again, there's just some benefits. Also, it has the steam line and the air hoses, which MTH just omitted entirely. So yeah. One thing I forgot to mention was that the Rivarossi engine also has dual articulated wheels, but with the bonus of the fact that the leading truck and trailing truck are actually sprung to be centered, so they don't just flop around. They actually center because there's springs that make sure they don't just flop around loosely. So they actually move along with the drivers. But yeah, definitely a worthy comparison, and two very different models. This one I would say compares more to like a Pro 2000 model, where it's mostly plastic, a lot of details, but very fragile. MTH is more robust, more die-cast, more chunky. Yeah, that's just up to personal preference, but I figured I'd include this clip in there for anyone that's curious about the two models. Besides detail though, these engines, they run great, they pull great, they have traction tires on the rear set of drivers. Again, because of the high radius, the really small minimum radius curve, it allows the engine to run much better through uneven tracks. So even if your engine doesn't have 18-inch radius curves, if your layout has 30-inch radius curves, but if you have some uneven track, this engine is able to navigate that much better than something else. So yeah, all in all, a very nice looking model. Again, runs great, pulls great, the smoke works, there's no smoking whistle, the cab light, headlight, tender light, number boards, and marker lights light up. The marker lights are white, they're not green, if you guys are curious. And yeah, if you guys, that's going to be pretty much it for the review though. If you guys are curious on how these guys run, I think I'll have a video up shortly on these engines running on my very, very small layout. I think my layout is 22-inch radius curve, so it'll probably look pretty ridiculous. But if you guys are interested in how these will look, double-headed pulling a short train, there will be a video out later. And yeah, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed on my opinions on these engines. Hopefully they were insightful. Hopefully they were useful to somebody out there. I do think that the fact that these were different, and 1601 had some special detail treatment was very, very cool of MTH to do. And yeah, so anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.